Welcome. I'm Barbara Call, Senior Director of Content Strategy at CIO Marketing Services. I'll be your host and moderator for today's webcast titled The Most Important Lessons Learned for Success in the Digital Era, and brought to you by CIO and HCLSoftware. I have two speakers with me today. First up is John Gallant, Enterprise Consulting Director at Foundry. John, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Barbara, thanks for having me. I'm really pleased to join you and Peter today. So my work with Foundry is I spend a lot of time talking to very senior IT executives about their role. And I also spend time trying to translate their needs and their goals for marketers in the industry who are trying to reach them and communicate with them.
Great. Nice to have you, John. And my second speaker is Peter Robinson, Vice President of Digital at Avnet. Welcome, Peter. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Barbara. Great to see you and John today. So I work at Avnet. Avnet's a global electronics component distributor. We specialize in engineering as well as supply chain, working with our customers get the best solutions to market. I lead digital at Avnet. I work with our various business units to bring digital platforms and products that help them accelerate their business value and connect with customers in an omni-channel way.
All right. Nice to have you, Peter. All right. For today's conversation, we'll be talking about digital transformation and preparing for the future, starting with some of our proprietary Foundry research. And then we'll explore some of Avnet's business drivers and use cases and Peter's tips for success. So I'd like to start with you, John. Can you paint a picture for us in terms of what's going on around digital business?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons I'm so happy to be on here today with Peter is because Peter is actually embodying and doing the things that I'm going to be talking about here. What I see when I talk to CIOs, what I hear from them is that this is a really critical time for the CIO function. CIOs are caught between trying to be operationally excellent and also driving the business forward. And they really want to lean much more in the direction of driving the business forward. And that's things like improving the customer experience and the employee experience today, which has changed dramatically, helping to spur innovation, develop things faster, capture the value of data, and grow revenue. And the expectations on the CIOs are pretty intense from the board, from the CEO, and from their line of business peers. So what we're seeing is this big focus on digital business and digital transformation initiatives, the kinds of things they're going to help take the company in a new direction, change the competitive landscape, change what's happening within their vertical industries, and really give them new platforms for growth going forward, new ways to utilize their data, new ways to spur development, all those kinds of things. So it's really a critical time. And there's a lot that goes into that, which we'll talk about, a lot of the things that they're working on from IT reinvention, changing the security paradigm, driving more automation within their business. But really, I think the emphasis is CIOs know that they need to be change makers. They need to drive digital transformation. They want to do that because that's really what that role has always been about. And they need to take steps to do that now.
Okay, thanks, John. Peter, does that gel with your outlook, what you're seeing?
Yeah, it does. I mean, everything John says resonates. I mean, we feel that pressure day in, day out of, the world around us is changing so fast, as well as the technology needs. And there's also a lot of new technology, coming out there, right? The recent rise of GPT puts this new emphasis on how people can interact with data through large language models. And it just puts another edge on top of that digital transformation. And what we're also seeing is people seeing these opportunities for systems to connect directly. People are looking for omni-channel experience. They want the same data that's coming to them via an email, on a portal, or through an API. They want to be able to connect with the same data wherever they are, whichever channel they want to. And I think on top of that, what you're also seeing is, people looking at opportunities to allow people to move to higher value work. And I think that's a big part of digital transformation, where you really put your customer and for us, our supply partners, at the center of that interaction versus our internal operations. And how do we create those digital channels that, free people up to allow them to go and work on higher value opportunities with customers and suppliers?
Okay. Thank you, Peter. John, what does the Foundry research show about the strategies that companies are using for digital business?
Yeah, it's a great question, Barbara. We do this study called the Digital Business Study, which really looks at these digital business and digital transformation initiatives, what's driving them, what obstacles are getting in the way of them, and things like what are they doing to become more of a digital business, to have more of this digital focus that Peter mentioned. And by the way, I want to echo what Peter said about AI. I mean, that just ratchets this up, adds more urgency as companies think about the transformative power of AI, and we can talk some more about that. But what we see in the digital business study is, again, a lot of focus on how do we mine value out of our data. One of the biggest obstacles today is really not a technology obstacle. It's this obstacle around having data that's clean, data that's organized, data that departments aren't fighting over who controls it. So this data management strategy is really important. Also, developing a business case. In many cases, companies have competing demands for what they want the IT teams to work on. What are these digital business initiatives? And I've really seen this in conversations with CIOs. This is accelerating when it comes to AI because lots of people are coming to them saying anything from get me an AI to help me figure out these business questions that we could solve through AI. So determining which are the right things to work on, what's the roadmap for digital transformation is really critical. And I think one of the other things that's non-technology oriented is everything around talent. So they're really focused on what's going to be the IT organization structure for the future and what are the skill sets we're going to need for the future. And when you think about everything that's happening around the data management and data strategy that we just talked about, automation, advanced analytics, including AI and machine learning, security, cloud, there's so many areas that require new skill sets and new talents. And the trick is finding those talents, retraining people, and making sure that you have the right people to do all the things you want to do in your digital business strategy.
All right. Thank you, John. Peter, how does this line up with what you're doing at Avnet?
Yeah, John touched on quite a number of things there. Let me take a stab at a couple of them. I think one definitely is around, what is your focus area? I think John spoke about, that there's so many things out there that you can go and do. So I think having the right strategy and the right tools and platforms and the outcomes, business outcomes that you want to drive towards. And that's one of the things, we did quite a number of digital initiatives over several years. And then we look back and what was the business value for those, right? It was whether it was a website or something, but how do we tie it to business value and what's the outcome, right? So we've been very focused on what are those business outcomes and what are the tools that help us get there. And also look closely at, do we have the right tools and platforms in place? And that's one we had, a really big conversation with HCL around, were we on the right platform? Were we on the right tool to drive kind of new digital experience, et cetera, that we wanted? So there we made, a strategic change. And, I think John touched on a whole bunch of things that's tough in IT. But one of those things is, you typically don't get, here's an additional budget to just go and digitally transform. You somehow have to repurpose existing dollars and find a way to stay flat. So I think working with partners and assessing your technology landscape and what's not adding value. I mean, we're very good at adding stuff. It's hard to remove stuff. So I think that requires really tough conversation with the business around, you're not getting value from it. Let's move that and move that dollars to something else, repurposing the dollars. The other one that I would touch on that John mentioned was around talent and training. So here, we actually focused on, we had people that have been at Avnet for, 10 years. They know our business well. They know our ERP. They know our data. And there's this whole new scary world of cloud and digital there. In that case, we got, a few people that got really excited to say, hey, I look at what I do today and can't imagine that I'm doing this until I retire. Maybe it's going to be commoditized or gone. And they wanted to get trained up on new technology. So we were able to repurpose a whole bunch of, people that were already in the company, knew our culture, knew our data. And once they were kind of cross-skilled in that digital and cloud space, they were able to accelerate that transformation for us at a rapid pace.
Yeah, and Barbara, if I could, I wanted to weigh in on something Peter mentioned at the beginning, was really, this issue of measuring the impact of these digital transformation or digital business initiatives. That comes up in a lot of conversations. What are the right KPIs right now? what is it that we're supposed to be measuring when we're going into new areas where we haven't had experience and we don't quite know the road ahead. And I think that, again, is accelerated by AI because, we're going to try to model things and ask the right questions, but there's no guarantee that these pilots or these initiatives are going to come up with the results or the benefits that we expect. So I think that's an ongoing issue.
Yeah, yeah. Peter, you mentioned one challenge around budgets that are flat. John, what does our research show in terms of other challenges that CIOs are facing?
Yeah, Peter just nailed a lot of them. One of the big ones is complexity of IT infrastructure. I moderated recently a day-long discussion with CIOs from some large multinational companies on IT reinvention and really looking at, do we have the right technology in place internally and in the cloud to do the things that we want to do? I mean, in many cases, our own infrastructure and the complexity of that is slowing us down and keeping us from doing the things that we want to do. We talked about skill sets and staffing and having the right people, competing priorities, but Peter mentioned a great one. Our research shows lack of a sufficient budget. And again, even though IT budgets are growing, we see that in our research, we see it in Gartner and IDC and Forrester and others show that. That doesn't mean they're growing at huge leaps and bounds, and they're not growing to support every project that's out there. So, those kinds of things make it challenging to create a roadmap for what you want to work on and to get those things done in a timely fashion.
Yeah, makes sense. Peter, have you seen any of these challenges yourself, or maybe your peers are experiencing them?
Yeah, definitely seen them. I think one of the ways that we're thinking about this is, and John spoke about, there's an expansion of IT services, right? And I think that's the challenge here in some of these areas, especially if you look at things like AI. It's not you're taking something you do today, it's something net new, right? And measuring that, the cost of that versus the business value, especially when at the moment you're still sort of producing dashboards and tools that are maybe in the early stages, or really, you're doing forecasting at the macro level of the company versus down getting those insights into where decisions are being made. So measuring that, is something you measure over quarters versus months or weeks. So I think that's a tough part of measuring the value. The area I think where the opportunity comes for us and for other people out there is, as you add new stuff, if you, for example, have got 5 databases and the same copies of data sitting in 5 places, how do you centralize that? How do you remove that? And one of the things, a part of our strategy has been, as we've replaced some technology that wasn't a good fit, how do we build a common microservice layer as we're replacing that, which then drives reusability? How do we shrink things like ETL? So I think we look at those things of, I add an API, how do I get rid of 5 ETL jobs to help fund that and stay flat? So I think that is a challenge out there. It's easier said than done. It does require all the stakeholders to agree to change, but I think it's the way forward. Just the overall expansion of IT costs for everybody, I don't think will be a good thing in the long run.
Yeah, Peter, if I could echo that again, that came up in the conversations around IT reinvention. These leaders know that has to happen. It's very difficult to sell that. It's very difficult to get other people excited about spending money on those kinds of consolidation projects, which likely will have a very big long-term impact. So that's a tricky road that people have to walk.
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah, Peter, early on you mentioned business outcomes, and I want to ask John, what are the business initiatives that are driving some of this technology investment?
Yeah, Barbara, every year for the last 22 years, Foundry has done this State of the CIO survey, and it really looks at the evolving role of the CIO. One of the areas it looks at is both business goals and technology investments. On the business goal side, the number one answer is increasing operational efficiency. And we see that in a variety of areas, from automation, business process automation, IT operations automation. We also see it in AI. We just recently did a big AI priorities survey, and the number one goal for AI initiatives was around increasing employee productivity. So this operational efficiency is a big thing. Cybersecurity, it almost doesn't matter what question we ask people. Security is one of the top answers. It's such a huge concern. And improving the customer experience is a very big one. We see CIOs spending a lot of time. How do we make this seamless for customers? How do we use analytics to improve the experience that they're having, predict what they might need, automate responses that are more efficient? So those are the top things that we're seeing as business goals behind IT investments.
Yeah, makes sense. Peter, I want to make sure we have some time to talk about what your business challenges were or your opportunities and how HCLSoftware helped with those.
Yeah, so I think that I'll just comment on some of the things John said. I think one of the big things we're looking at is frictionless transactions, right? So one of the, we have a lot of business partners, a lot of suppliers, a lot of customer partners. And one of our focuses for us is how do we, remove friction from those transactions? And we do that, through looking through, how many interactions are there with people? And we're seeing a really big rise in, API to API kind of communications between, because that's kind of an open standard where you can connect business processes. So I think that's one huge opportunity, I think, for many, many industries to digitize those things. And Barbara, you mentioned on HCL. So it's interesting because what I've been focused on is tying that frictionless transactions to APIs and to the digital experience layer, again, the omni-channel view. And we worked with HCL around, we had a commerce platform in one part of our business that primarily it's a B2B business where things come through direct digital channels through EDI or B2B or API. But what we still needed was that self-service layer where customers could come in, and we wanted to be able to innovate in that self-service space. But again, we wanted to have that common backend library that we could use for the omni-channel experience for the API, as well as connect them to things like large language models, et cetera. So we've been working with HCL on rolling out HCL DX product, which is, cloud native package. It allows us to have it deployed around different locations around the globe. We're able to store, regional data where we need it to be. And we're able to build that as a platform that can be used to accelerate multiple different journeys across the company. So that's part of the other part that comes back into the consolidation that, John spoke about before of how do you get everybody on board to shrink? And one of the ways we're focused on that is how do we build a digital platform that we open up to a lot of people inside the organization? We work with HCL on building reusable components in that platform, as well as reusable backend microservices. And with that approach, what we're able to do is have lots and lots of different people across the org that know their data, that know their systems, be responsible to build that microservice layer. Then at the global team, we're able to build that interaction layer for them and then open that up as a platform. So this switches us to this kind of platform and digital product strategy. We then move away from the monolithic approach and the database. And HCL's been a great partner on this journey. And they've got a great product with DX, which we're happy with. We've got that rolled out in our European business, and we have a plan over the next 9 to 12 months to roll that to Asia and Americas.
That's great.
Yeah, Barbara, can I comment on that? Because I'm so impressed with this, and this is one of the reasons I was really pleased to be able to join Peter here. This platform approach is so powerful because it takes us out of a game of one-offs. So it takes it out of figuring out we're doing this one thing and all the work that goes into doing that, then selling that to other parts of the organization, try to get support for the next thing. This platform approach empowers lots of opportunities and makes them faster. So, Peter and his team have done a tremendous amount of work to get to that point, but creating this platform strategy that he has just really opens up the door for lots of future opportunities and advances them really quickly. We use that word agility a lot. You hear it in almost everything that people do in marketing and other things, but it's real, and it's important to be in a position where you can move on opportunity and not have to recreate the wheel every time you're trying to do something new.
That's great. Thank you, John. I think you just answered my last question before we close. I wanted to check in with both of you on, what's some words of advice or quick wins that you would offer our viewers. Anything else you would add, John?
Yeah, I would say there's really a 3-step process that I think is most important. One is, and by the way, I believe this is a great opportunity for CIOs, is to be working closely with the board, the CEO, line of business peers. And by the way, when we do research, we know that that's what CEOs want from their CIOs, to work more closely with line of business peers. work with these stakeholders to understand what are the biggest business opportunities that we can tackle. How do we get to that, seamless customer experience that Peter was talking about, for example, or other things? Come up with the key business objectives that we're trying to achieve. Then you could build a strategy around that. That enables you to understand what resources you need, what talent you need, what you need to do with your data. And in the third part of that is now you can start executing on that. You can develop tactical plans for fixing what needs to be fixed, organizing. You don't have to boil the ocean and recreate your entire data strategy in one step. You can fix the pieces of the data that are required to support the next business initiative and continue to build that way. But I think taking that big picture, then strategy, then tactical steps is the way to go. Otherwise, you're doing this one-off every time.
Yeah, that's great. Peter, what advice would you offer?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that John just said definitely resonate. I think aligning with the business, right, and the business outcomes up front that you can tie all your initiatives to is absolutely critical, because that's IT departments you're here to work with the business. You're here to help the organization be successful and play a key role. I think from there, one thing John just touched on, which is around how do you get started. I think that's probably one of the hardest things, right? Because some of these projects can be gigantic, and I think you do have to be practical in a sense that you're not going to change everything overnight. So I think we do, looked at what were some small use cases that you could get started, where you can prove out value, where you can prove out capability. The other thing from my side that's been successful for us is we didn't, go and say we're going to be in 5 different cloud, every single hyperscaler. We're going to, spend lots of time picking between lots of different tools. We picked a core set of tools and focused on those, and focused on getting deep in those tool sets versus chasing, because there'll always be something with a new feature or something this one doesn't have. But when you're in the beginning of that transformation, you're not using all of the tool sets anyway, right? You're still early on. So I think that thing of being pragmatic in that space. The other one on my mind, which I think a lot about, is, inside, large companies, these things take time, and it's tough, right? To move a multi-billion-dollar business just to even cut off a website. It takes a lot of people involved. So I think you have to stay the course, focus on having a good strategy that allows you to, as I said, I think the platform approach is working well for us, but reusability is a key part of that, right? I think organizations for the future, you can't say I have an internal application and I have an external application for the customers, especially if you want, to drive self-service or omni-channel. You want one channel for the employees, the customers. You don't want to have different channels. And I think that's another part where IT departments can unlock, opportunities to cost save, because you've got 2 sets of UI, 2 sets of databases. You have ETL jobs. Security, John touched on. Security is table stakes, but when you, kind of waste breeds waste. When you've got X number of extra databases, you then need X number of security. You've got X number of endpoints. Those things add up very, very quickly to the cost and to the challenges to transform.
Yeah, and I want to just touch on one other thing about what Peter's done. I think we all tend to think of, business to consumer, B2C kinds of applications, that world moves faster than the B2B world. I love that Peter's doing this in the B2B world and creating those experiences for their business partners, the kinds of things that people aspire to do for individual customers out in the consumer realm, because those 2 worlds are coming together really fast, and you can't expect 2 different kinds of experiences in your professional life and your life as a consumer.
Yep, very true.
Great point. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. This has been great. A lot of great information, a lot of great insights. Thank you both. We've been speaking with John Gallant of Foundry and Peter Robinson of Avnet. Thanks to you, our audience, for joining us. For CIO and HCLSoftware, I'm Barbara Call.